all funds for the war to the detriment of the well-being of citizens, the Kremlin continues to cut social items of the state budget. Medicine and education have already been affected, followed by expenses to support the national economy.
Next year, the Russian government intends to reduce budget expenditures to support the national economy by 6%, and in 2025 by another 16%. The authorities will redirect the saved money to military expenses, the share of which will become a record in the budget since Soviet times: 10,775 billion rubles, or almost 30%. The Moscow Times writes,
The National Welfare Fund of Russia, which has repeatedly seen the Kremlin in crisis situations, is also being reduced. The reason is the influence of Western sanctions on the energy sector of the Federation and the ever-increasing costs of the war against Ukraine, experts assure.
За этот год, полтора года,
over the year, a year and a half, they spent $100 billion to support the economy. Based on this, the $50 billion that are now remaining in this fund will be preserved as much as possible, especially considering that the sanctions are finally in effect for from 6 months to a year. Then they will no longer have financial resources. Of course, China can help, but we know that China also has certain problems today.
Income from exporting goods abroad has also declined. Compared to the first year of the war, raw materials revenue decreased by 34%. The main losses are from significant discounts on Gazprom supplies to Russia's few partners. Thus, the volume of the revenues at the end of 2023 was the lowest since the COVID pandemic.
Income from the export of metals dropped by 15%, chemical products by 35%, wood and its products by 30%, machinery and equipment by 25%. The only export item for which the Federal Customs Service recorded a slight increase in income was food and agricultural raw materials. Goods brought in 4.3% more than last year. The Moscow Times writes on Telegram.
Amid the declining incomes in Russia, internal problems are worsening. The collapse of housing and communal infrastructure is one illustrative example. Despite numerous accidents in the housing and communal services sector, costs for maintaining infrastructure will be reduced by almost 500 billion to 360 billion rubles in 2 years.
As for the
current problems that Russia is experiencing, this was expected, because if we are talking about housing and communal services, if we are talking about roads, about providing some basic social needs, then traditionally, even if money was allocated for this, the problems were not really solved. And every time we talked about the Russian economy, then as a rule we talked about some big figures related to income from the energy exports, when traditional everyday problems had not been solved for years.
At the same time, the Kremlin continues to put a good face on a bad game. The indicators of the Russian economy, judging by the reports of the Ministry of Finance, are not critical. The reason is the infusion of trillions of government rubles into the military-industrial complex and the maintenance of the army. However, the Kremlin is unlikely to be able to maintain economic stability in this way for long, experts warn. Reported by Diana Kolesnik, Larisa Zubenko, UATV News.